This is CNN. This is the news. We're asking you to come on and tell the truth.
And that's why more people are watching the Cartoon Network SpongeBob reruns right now, Jim.
Capitol Hill is buzzing with energy springing from this week's Trump executive orders and actions. We thought we'd check in on the path ahead in the House of Representatives with Tennessee Congressman, my good friend Tim Burchett. Tim, you had a little exchange with Jim Acosta this morning. Do you think CNN will ever invite you back?
Well, I just saw one of the people from Fox, and they thanked me for sticking up for him. And so I thought it was pretty lame, the whole thing. Yeah, I doubt it. You know, he has me on every few weeks, you know, and you and I have talked about it in the past. And I suspect no, but we will see.
So bring us inside the room, Tim. What's the vibe with House Republicans right now in the wake of all of these executive orders delivering on the promises that many in Congress made on the campaign trail?
Absolutely. You know, what surprises me is the media. I mean, you know President Trump better than anybody. You know, he says what he means. And, you know, I mean, I'm sure his handlers go, oh, man, I wish he hadn't said that. But they never have to go behind Donald J. Trump and say, this is what the president means. You know, the bigger story ought to be that we finally have a president and a politician that's kept his word on every dadgum thing he said. The J6 people, the border, people not showing up for work, dadgum everything, man. I'm awful glad. But you know as well as I do, the trouble. I was talking to our friend Marjorie Taylor Greene just less than an hour ago. I said, the trouble's going to be in this room on our side of the aisle when it comes to the real deal, because, you know, there's 20 or 30 of us that sit back on center's row back there and that you and I named and that understand and get it. But the rest of these guys, I'm worried, dude. I really am. I know people are going to get fired up, but thank God that we've got a president that understands America and has kept his word, because we would have lost our country, Matt.
Well, what do you think that Republicans in Congress might do to frustrate the momentum?
I think exactly. Thank you for asking that question. I've talked to Marjorie about this. I'm afraid we're going to pass something really conservative on the House, something you and I would agree to. And the Senate's going to pass something, and they're not going to align, and they're going to go like this. And then the big boys orchestrate that, as you know, the sewer. I don't want to call it a swamp anymore, but dadgum the sewer orchestrates that. And then, you know, the staffers, as you and I've heard many times, the staffers don't like that too much. You know, as if they have any consideration in any of this stuff. It should be the congressmen or the senators. And then everybody gets frustrated and we pass some huge omnibus. That's what I'm worried about. That's what I'm worried about.
Our friend Eli Crane was on the program last night. He said once these deportations get going and you've got some crying mamas out there or people that are upset about their family members having to go back to their home country, that some House Republicans will back down. Do you share Congressman Crane's concern?
100%. I said that, I think, on another show today, that I said what they ought to be concerned about is, where was all this crime when you and I railed on about 300,000 missing children across that dadgum border? You know, they didn't raise a peep over that, but now all of a sudden they're going to do this, you know, and that's where, again, the trouble's going to come from our side of the aisle, because they'll start peeling off, and you'll get a call from some factory that has a dadgum sweatshop, and the guy or gal writes a big check, some chicken processing thing, and they're going to call you and say, hey, man, we can't survive anymore. If we can't pay people 50 cents an hour and make them work all day, you know, and so that's where I think the problem's going to be, Matt.
Well, even if it arises as you described, I actually think we're going to get the job done anyway, because I'm not entirely sure we even need an immigration bill. If we go back to those executive actions that President Trump put in place, we will stop the bleeding that the Biden administration caused, and then you hope the country wants to ensconce that in general law. I want to talk about spending, because you are one of the few spending hawks remaining on Capitol Hill, and we've got this big reconciliation legislation coming on the budget. Do you think that will actually cut spending?
I think it'll cut spending, and then they'll find some place to spend it. As I stated when I was in the state legislature, I found a bill that I saved $6 million. And I remember a Democrat colleague beside me whispered in my ear, he said, Burchett, this is a great bill. And I was like, wow, thanks. You know, he's a ranking Democrat member. And he said, but I know exactly where we're going to spend it. I've seen a lot of big cut spending plans, Andy Biggs and I talked about, your dear friend and mine, has said, Burchett, he said, this is what I'm afraid of right here. And that is, and they'll make the cuts and then they'll spend it at the Pentagon.
Yeah, if you have a bucket and you drill a hole in the bottom of the bucket, and that would be the spending cuts, and the water level comes down, you think, oh, well, maybe we're spending less. But if you keep pouring more in to the top of the bucket, you won't ever get that level to decrease. And I think that's what you're talking about, some of those budget games. And I couldn't have you on the program without having a little bit of UAP discussion. I gave an interview with UAP James recently talking about the discussions members of Congress have had around this issue. Take a listen. We'll chat about it on the other side. We have members of Congress who believe that not only are there extraterrestrials on Earth, but that they have built bases and that they are operating out of bases. I have personally met with people in uniform for the United States military who believe that there are hybrid breeding programs going on right now. You've been an advocate for UAP transparency. Where does that effort currently stand?
Well, I tell a fun story about the reason that I was able to ever get any, and then in the beginning, some decent information was because of you. I guess that's for another show or not, but it was your legal knowledge. I remember I leaned over you and said something, and you took them apart, and that was beautiful. But I don't disagree with that. That was Jeremy Corbell. I think I've sort of modified what I've talked about, because you think about the light years. I mean, I don't know. I can't quite grasp that. But a lot of the sightings we're having are around what are deep water areas where we literally know more about the surface of the moon than we do these areas. I think these beings possibly had been here for quite some time, and I think we're just sort of a stopover, and they're using possibly our water. I talked to an admiral, went out that door right behind me. I can remember him as he was leaving, and we were talking about it, and he's a little cagey, and then he leaned over and whispered to me. He said, "Tim, they're real. They are real." And I was at a friend of Ralph Norman, as you know, has the Conservative Opportunity Society. Crazy name, but a good group of conservatives. And they had a former engineer of NASA, and he said, and somebody said, "Hey, Burchett wants to know about those little green men and those flying saucers." And the guy turned to him and said, "Congressman," he said, "we don't know what they are. These things are operating in our airspace, and we cannot fathom their ability. Whether it's a black hole or a wormhole, we're not sure how they're doing what they're doing." And man, the room just went silent. So I'm kind of modifying my thought process. We're getting ready to do a new committee. I think Chairman Comer has probably caught so much heat because the UFO community, over 55%, more people believe in UFOs than believe in Congress, as you know. So we got a lot to work on, a lot to chew on, and I hope to come back on your show, Matt, and talk a little more about that, because we're gonna what you I didn't know about it. You're the one who explained it to me, was the committee system, and that we had to have a committee where we could bring people in, and I think we're getting ready to get that.
Oh, so that's big news, Tim. If you believe that there could be a select committee established with subpoena power, with the ability to gather this evidence, to make reports, that would be big time news. You think we're on the heels of such an announcement potentially?
I think so. I really do. I think the UFO community has done one thing. Is they put the heat on their legislators. And I mean, I've had these guys that were critics of mine and publicly are critics, and they lean over to me and say, "Hey, Burchett, man, what's really going on with this thing?" And that drone situation didn't hurt our cause one bit, although I have another theory on that. That's another show. But, Matt, honestly, if when we were at that base, and if you hadn't have, I was going to have to walk out. But you put the pressure on them. I've never seen a general get nervous until Matt Gaetz unloaded on him, and it was beautiful. I will remember that for the rest of my life, and that was one of the highlights of my 7 years in Congress, brother, because I've never seen anything like that.
And Tim is talking about an event at Eglin Air Force Base in my district where some pilots had brought information to us that they wanted us to investigate. Some of the higher-ups didn't want us to see the information. We ultimately got it, and that was a UFO sighting that was, again, over water. Water covers 75% of the Earth, so it's not entirely coincidental, but it does seem a lot of these UAP sightings are over water. Do you think there's anything to that and the basing concepts that you were laying out?
I do. When I've talked to people or their sonar people, and the way they hide it from us, Matt, they say it's because our sonar, I believe, I haven't been briefed on this. I'm just from what I'm putting together, but we have some secret sonar. But what's so crazy about it, like we're hiding it from the Chinese. Well, heck, Matt, the Chinese sold us the components for it. They know it's in our sonar probably better than we do. But when they tell me something's moving at hundreds of miles an hour underwater, and our capabilities are, I don't think we have anything to do 40 miles an hour. And these things, this one was large as a football field underwater. And this was a documented case. And I have an admiral telling me this stuff. And it just, to me, I think
so that's where you think the bases are, is underwater then, because of those reports?
I do. I just think traveling light years, I think it happens. I think it's possible. The vastness of God's great universe. I mean, light years, the light from those stars that we see at night left there before the time of Christ. I mean, the vastness of God's great universe is unreal.
Yeah.
And I'm not worried about them harming me. I mean, if they, with that capabilities, they would have barbecued us a long time ago, brother. So I'm not worried about it, but I wish the government, they're spending millions upon millions of dollars on something, then telling us they don't exist. Yet they won't give us a report. And one other thing, I'm sorry to run out of time, but you're going to run out of time on me. But I had an amendment on one of the bills that it was just 2 pages. It just disclosure. And then Schumer got a hold of it, and he wrote this 60-page bill, and everybody go, "Oh, that's the greatest thing ever." And he modeled it after the Kennedy files.
Right. No, I got you. It was a total bastardization, Tim. It existed to try to obfuscate. You've been trying to bring us accountability. I do have to run, but please keep us up to date on this select committee that we hope gets us some answers, okay?
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you and your friendship.
Tim Burchett, the great congressman from Tennessee.